Hi students, Jordan here and welcome back to Bio25 Online. I apologize for not filming my typical intro today, but this is actually the final video of online instruction and I'm pretty sad about it, so I've chosen not to show my face because I think it'll make getting through this video a lot easier. So without further ado, I'm just going to get into my presentation. So a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. You do have a quiz this week. It will cover Lab 18 from last week and Lab 19 from this week. It opens on Monday and it closes on Wednesday at 11:59 p.m. So please stay on top of your deadlines and make sure you get that quiz done on time. Next week, in a similar format, you will have a quiz that opens on Monday and is due on Wednesday, and the quiz will be over Labs 20 and 21, which are both dissection labs. So I can't actually perform a sheep brain dissection or a cow eye dissection from the comfort of my own home. So for these labs, I've actually uploaded online resources for you to be able to complete the dissections virtually. And if you have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out. Finally, your last lab exam is coming up. I know it's crazy because you just finished your third one, but it will cover labs 18, 19, 20, and 21, and it will open Wednesday, May 6th and close Sunday, May 10th. After the exam closes, I will be submitting your averaged quiz grade out of 100 points, your 4 lab exam grades, and any extra credit you may have received to your lecture instructor. So I would encourage you to clear up any discrepancies you may have over your lab grade before Sunday, May 10th. Additionally, I'll be posting a study guide for your lab exam by Wednesday, April 29th, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. So just really quickly, I will still be holding office hours. They will be every Wednesday at 1 p.m. and the link to my office hours is located at the top of your course modules page. And then finally, your extra credit assignment, which is worth a whole 10 points, is due by May 8th. As a refresher, it is an anatomy themed TikTok that is educational in some way, and I would encourage you all to complete that assignment. So now to get into today's lab, we will be working out of pages 105 and 106 in your lab manual, and we'll be talking about the spinal nerves and cranial nerves. So on this slide, I have a table here that's showing you the 12 different cranial nerves. Yes, we have 12 of them, and they are listed in order here from number 1 to number 12. There are actually several acronyms you can use to remember the different cranial nerves, and many of them are inappropriate and kind of funny, so I would encourage you to Google these acronyms so that you can help yourself study the cranial nerves. Also, it is important that you know the name, number, and function of each type. So, for example, I might say in a question, what is cranial nerve number 1, and I would expect you to know that it is the olfactory nerve. Or maybe I would say, what is the function of cranial nerve number 10? And you would need to know that it supports both sensory and motor function. So tables like these are really great study tools for understanding the name, number, and function of each cranial nerve. And now we're going to talk about the anatomy and where they're located. We have the human brain, and the cranial nerves can actually all be seen from this view of the human brain. So it starts with the olfactory nerve, and then we work our way down. So the olfactory nerve is cranial nerve number 1, and then we have the optic nerve right here, which is cranial nerve number 2, and then so on and so forth. But from top to bottom, we basically go from 1, 2, 3, all the way down to number 12. So if you're ever really stuck, you can kind of just start looking for the nerves on the brain and start counting, and maybe look for some of the bigger ones to try to orient yourself. I would definitely recommend that, but this is a really great study tool for looking at the cranial nerves holistically and seeing what they look like in relevance to the anatomy of the adult brain. So first off, we have the olfactory nerve. It is cranial nerve number 1, and as the name implies, it is responsible for our sense of smell. It is also a sensory nerve, so that is important for you to know. Next, we have the optic nerve, which is cranial nerve number 2. You can see the optic nerve right here. As the name implies, it is function, is vision, And it is also a sensory nerve, so you can think, so your sense of smell, that's a sense, so sensory, and like your eyesight, that's a sense, so sensory, and kind of just using your brain to help you associate those functions will help it stick better, I think. All right, so we have a couple of cranial nerves we need to talk about in this image. First, the oculomotor nerve, which you can see right here. This nerve is actually very important because it controls all eye muscles except the superior oblique and lateral rectus. So because it's controlling muscles, that makes this nerve a motor nerve. Next, we have the trochlear nerve, which you can see right here. And the function of this nerve is control of the superior oblique eye muscle. Next, we have the trigeminal nerve, which you can see here, but I'll actually come back to that in a second because I think there's images later in my slides that show this nerve a little better, but you can still see it in this picture. And then we have the abducens nerve, which is this little guy running right here. And the function of the abducens nerve is control of the lateral rectus eye muscle, which makes it, you guessed it, a motor nerve. Next, we have the facial nerve, which you can kind of see branching right here, but again, I'll talk about that in a later slide. So, I believe I promised you some information on the trigeminal nerve. So you can actually see the trigeminal nerve right here. Trigeminal nerve is cranial nerve number 5, and its function is mastication and facial sensation. Now that keyword sensation means that it functions both for sensory and for motor. And it's a pretty big nerve. It's got a lot of branches coming off of it, and I think that helps identify it pretty easily. So now we'll be talking about the facial nerve, cranial nerve number 7. As you can see, it's located on the face. It has a lot of branches. This actually shows you all of its branches and how that's innervated on the face. And for the facial nerve, its function is control of facial muscles and the anterior 2/3 of the tongue, which makes it actually a sensory and motor nerve because it helps control your salivary glands, which is a sense, not a motor control. So now I'm going to talk about the vestibulocochlear nerve right here, pretty big guy, right? And this controls hearing of the inner ear, which would make it a sensory nerve because it's controlling a sense. How I remember the name of this one is I always think of cochlear implants, which are those devices that a lot of deaf people receive so they can hopefully restore their hearing, and cochlear implants directly deal with a lot of these structures, hence the name vestibulocochlear nerve. So now we're going to talk about the glossopharyngeal nerve, which is located right here. Its function is controlling the pharynx muscles and the posterior 1/3 of the tongue. And because it controls the parotid gland, it actually has sensory and motor functions, so that's kind of a fun fact. So now we'll talk about the vagus nerve located right here. The reason this picture is so big is because the vagus nerve has a huge job in our bodies. It actually is the autonomic motor, thoracic, and abdominal sensation nerve, and it has huge roles in both sensory and motor function. And when I say that, I mean it controls your heart, lungs, and digestive system, so the vagus nerve is very, very, very important to your body's function. Next, we have the accessory nerve and the hypoglossal nerve. So the hypoglossal nerve is located here in the tongue, and then the accessory nerve is located right here, as you can see, and then hypoglossal again. But just to tell you about their functions a little bit, the accessory nerve innervates the sternocleidomastoid and trapezius muscles, and it is purely for motor function. And then the hypoglossal nerve is the nerve that's controlling your tongue muscles, and that again is a motor nerve. So now we need to talk about some of the spinal nerves. We actually break them down into groups or plexuses. So as you can see here, you have the cervical plexus, which is the grouping of nerves in your neck. And the phrenic nerve right here is actually a part of the cervical plexus. Next, we have the brachial plexus, but I'll talk about that a little bit more in depth in a second. So moving on here, you can see the lumbar plexus, and that's just this grouping of lumbar nerves. And there are some nerves coming off of the lumbar plexus that you need to know, but we'll talk about those in a moment. And then you have the sacral plexus, and again, there are some nerves of the sacral plexus that you need to know, but for now, just know that this grouping of nerves is known as the sacral plexus. So as promised, here is the slide on the brachial plexus. There are actually 5 terminal branches of the brachial plexus, and these are the axillary nerve, musculocutaneous nerve, radial nerve, ulnar nerve, and median nerve. You can see them all pictured right here for your convenience, and again, there are 5 of them. So I've left this picture up here for your convenience, but we just need to talk about a couple more nerves that belong to the lumbar plexus and the sacral plexus. So coming off of the lumbar plexus, we have the femoral nerve and obturator nerve, and you can see both of those nerves in this middle picture here. And then finally, coming off of the sacral plexus, we have the pudendal nerve, sciatic nerve, tibial nerve, and common fibular nerve. So the pudendal nerve is located kind of in the perineal region, and you can see it in the upper gluteal area. And then the sciatic nerve is that really big nerve that runs down the back of the leg, and it actually branches into the tibial nerve and common fibular nerve, which you can see in the back of the calf. All the functions of these nerves and innervations and such are located in the middle of page 106 in your lab manual if you have any questions about that. Without further ado, that brings us to the end of our final lab presentation. If you have any questions, you know where to find me as always. And finally, instead of a fun anatomy fact of the day, I just want to take a second to thank you all for a great semester. You've all changed my life in ways you couldn't possibly imagine, and I am very, very forever grateful for your endless curiosity for anatomy and healthcare, and I know you're all going to go so far in your lives, and I just want to reiterate that I am always here if you ever need me, and I included a little anatomical picture of a heart because I love you all.